hold on a minute. We're live. This is Cowboy. We got Veles, and it is Friday, and it is September 26th, 11 a.m. EST. This is a lot of people's favorite time of every week. Or, well, Veles, I think for you, it's 2 or 3 weeks a month because you're traveling to do, I don't know, Arctic reconnaissance or whatever crazy stuff you do sometimes. But this is an amazing show. Veles has actually almost single-handedly carried Rogue for, most of 2024. So we're indebted to you. And I'm really looking forward to the show today. Everybody have your pen and pencil and whatever you write with, have a pad, write things down. As V would say, have your dark roast ready, and you might have to watch this show again. Veles, how you doing, sir?
I'm very good, and thank you for the incredibly kind words, my friend. It's an honor and a privilege. I mean that sincerely, to always be here with you and all the ships at sea. And my thanks to all of you who've reached out via the Veles email. Again, for those of you that either need access to Discord or just need to throw a note our way about either the show or, as Nick and I were joking before we went on the air, hey, I can't find that link to that website and similar. So that email again is 1917 VELES at gmail.com, 1917 Veles at gmail.com. And my thanks to a number of you who have already reached out on a variety of topics. So we're at the end of September. And for those of you who may have missed it, we're now officially in fall, which means the Southern Hemisphere is officially in spring. And I've got a person I work with who's texting me saying, can you call me? I'm like, I'll call you in an hour. They're like, I'll be on a plane. I'm like, okay. Nothing has changed in 25 years of me working professionally. So we've got a lot to cover. And I've got a few bombshells for you. So let's roll into it. Private equity firms, more of the same. Private equity press continues to speak enthusiastically about investing in medical service firms, the medical industry in general, Europe, and they're very enthusiastic about the prospect of lowered interest rates. Lowered interest rates will make their deals more profitable. It's not just about getting better rates for new deals by private equity firms. It's their ability to refinance debt, who's easier when the rates go down. An interesting item from some of that press. In some PE circles, they're discussing what they call the revenge of the blue-collar worker. Now, what does that mean? It means private equity is also investing in service firms who repair all the old stuff we haven't taken care of or performed maintenance on in years. Europe in particular, but also the United States. Late this week, the private equity newswires began discussing their interest in European defense firms, given Europe's stated, keyword, goal of renewing their military equipment. The bigger question is, how are they going to pay for it? Energy supplies. From the irony department, Europe remains the biggest buyer of Russian fuels despite sanctions per oilprice.com. The two biggest suppliers of Russian fuels to Europe are China and India, at a markup, of course. This is why the United States has been pressuring China and India to stop buying Russian fuel, not to put pressure on those countries, but to put pressure on Europe. Europe, ironically, who has several member states trying to start World War III with Russia, but yet continue to buy Russian fuel. So how much of the conflict is about containing Russian aggression, and how much of it is a desire by Europe and major powers to chew up Slavic lives? Being half Slavic, I take that personally. India has responded to the effect, what do you care who we buy fuel from? It's part of our national security. Given that it is India, this is an opportunity to make a buck, who always gets their attention. Equally, this begs the question, is the real reason for the White House telling companies H-1B visas will not cost you $100,000 is further pressure on India in regard to the European Union fuel, rather than actually fixing the H-1B abuse? Inquiring minds want to know. Lord knows we've had abuse of the H-1B system, or actually the visa system. It's a whole bunch of different numerical identifiers for those visas. Finders, keepers, and the Union Gold. No news, folks. I just wanted to make sure that you knew I'm still keeping an eye on it. The court case remains quiet for the moment, but I'm keeping an eye on it. ESW Rogue, your advanced source for news. Just a reminder, we let you know almost a month ago they were going to vote on a Palestine statehood at the UN, a vote who is as much about a crumbling EU identity and an attempt to anger the US and Israel. Social media. Data point came out recently saying 20% of Americans receive their information from TikTok. That's kind of a huge thing, begging the question, how many receive their information on X or Twitter? In the era I grew up in, with 3 primary television networks in the United States, if someone was to pop up with 20% capture of the public's attention, that would be sort of huge. It's still huge, of course. We've just become numb to both the spread of social media and the degree to which we believe it. Pete Hegseth and the Pentagon. 2 amusing items about old Pete. Yes, I know a lot of people don't like him, including ex-military. Just a reminder, his job is not to be liked. It's to run the defense, now War Department. Like a lot of Trump appointees, he may be there to do the heavy lifting and someone else will roll in later. We will see. First item is Pete has informed the press they need to sign a pledge. No press reporter will gather information not approved for release. MSNBC said their reporters that won't happen. MSNBC being the same network who fell over themselves that Jimmy Kimmel is the Jesus of opposition to the White House. Second, Pete has ordered all senior military personnel to Washington, D.C. for a meeting with no stated agenda. There's a lot of people out there offering their thoughts on what that could be. There are some who believe this is to make sure none of our senior military commanders go rogue should there be a drone sighting or similar. Veles, what do you mean? Well, rather than keep getting excited about supposed Russian drones near Poland, the EU is now saying the Russians are buzzing the airports in Denmark. I'm sorry, what? Russia has drones flying over Denmark? For what? To see the latest price of fish? Many in the alternative space have covered so many attempts to blame Russia to begin a full-scale war in Europe. Donald took an amusing tactic this week on that topic. He essentially said to Europe, go ahead and do it, but without our weapons or support. That's a kick in the privates, my friends. Anyone remember Libya? Europe ran out of spare parts and munitions within 2 days, and the U.S. had to save their bacon. Now you want to take on Russia. Russia's not Libya, Europe, and your justification is even weaker this time than it was the last. So what does that have to do with Pete Hegseth? There's no other way to say it, folks. I've personally witnessed and worked with uniformed military personnel who were bought and paid for by defense contractors and private equity. It's not too much of a stretch to say we have military commanders in our ranks on London, Davos, and God knows who else's payrolls. My gut says this is a move to put our officers on notice. We know who some of you are working for and who some of you are sympathetic to. If you authorize something who causes World War III, the level of hell who will come down on you and everyone who knows you will be Old Testament. I remember the famous line by none other than George Takei in John Wayne's film, The Green Berets. Takei played a South Vietnamese officer, and they asked him if the Viet Cong had spies inside their firebase. Takei replied, I have VC in my own unit, and I know who they are. This is for real, my friends, and we, ironically, do not have Cold War Soviet officers standing up to the Politburo saying, I'm not launching missiles against the Americans until that's confirmed. Speaking of Ukraine, noting a prior program, I gave an armchair general comment about how critical the city of Dnipro is to the overall conflict, Dnipro inside Ukraine. You may also hear the media make statements about the Dnipropetrovsk region, and what you need to understand is that that is the region surrounding that city. It's not a separate place. Very loosely said, if Dnipro falls, you can take the large waterway all the way to Kiev. All the other fortress buildups in Ukraine have been overtaken by Russian forces. Ukraine is also now conscripting citizens up to the age of 60. Noting what I said a moment ago about Pete Hegseth and various other events this week, this is one of the root causes. If it were not for the neighborhood in Europe it sits in, Ukraine would shortly become Somalia. The tragedy that is this conflict knows no limits. Another area no media outlets are covering is anyone with wealth or influence in Ukraine has fled that country or at a minimum removed their families. That hasn't gone unnoticed by the average citizen in Ukraine. This is also why the repression continues in order to maintain order in that country. Meanwhile, Europe continues to buy Russian fuel in the black market to keep themselves going, while at the same time, a number of European countries talk war with Russia. The German government acknowledged this week they would expect 1,000 military casualties a day in any conflict with Russia. No comment from the French government on what their potential losses could be. Never mind the wealthy kids in Germany at the dance clubs failing to understand that would mean the first draft in that country since World War II. The Russian military is also hitting Ukraine's various rail lines from providing reinforcements and supplies from reaching conflict areas. Though as an effective fighting force, the military of Ukraine is nearly gone. I don't want the following comments to sound like it's a repeat of the week. This conflict cannot go on much longer, and winter is coming as well. Certain parties in London and Europe need this war to go on for a variety of reasons. We are therefore back at a moment in time when everything, including aliens, might be used to cause a false flag. At the same time, let's consider that for a moment. You have that hypothetical event and 2 to 3 European powers say, okay, that's it. We're no longer unofficially at war with Russia. We're officially at war. Okay, then what? Everyone drives over to Poland and attacks from there. Europe, who couldn't fight Libya actively for more than 48 hours, is now going to enter Europe's biggest meat grinder since the 1940s. Or are they stupid enough to think they can rely entirely on drones and perhaps a few battlefield nuclear weapons? The U.S. has clearly stated they're welcome to attack Russia, but the U.S. isn't getting involved. Said another way, you're on your own, Europe. Our friend Patrick. Patrick Ryan has a couple of amusing items from his corner of the universe. First, he discussed how when he created his cult state website, he made sure it was 100% unhackable. So various parties, and you know who you are, went after the infrastructure hosting that website. So when Patrick began his site called Dark Stoa and directed content there back to Cult State, then he stopped posting after he posted his content about blackmail inflation. Many of you in our audience will recall Patrick's excellent work in articulating how blackmail loses value over time due to what you would call inflation. So you have to keep adding new blackmail. How does one harm such a system? You damage the means to create new blackmail. You might know that chess move is taking out Jeff Epstein, Jean-Luc Brunel, and Peter Nygaard. No, I'm not saying or even implying Patrick did that. I'm just saying he is very brilliant and he reads things far more easily than most, including people whose job it is to study these things. I've made comments on other shows that if I was still working for certain people in Washington, D.C., we would basically offer Patrick $500,000 and whatever sort of tchotchkes he'd like to come work for us. Patrick went on to explain he was targeting specific people with those websites. Again, think in terms of taking out the Epsteins of the world. He did not target apex or senior elites in the world. He was specifically targeting the people who clean up the messes caused by those people. As he described them, the fixers, the intel operations, the get stuff done cast, who billionaires owe as hire. Now, as is often the case with Patrick, here's the bombshell. It's also why I buried this one in the middle of today's show. He was discussing this on September 14th. Today is the 26th. And I don't know why I said the 29th in my logo there, but anyway, today's the 26th, and open media coverage about James Comey aired around the 24th. And of course, we had the conviction yesterday. In a discussion Patrick was having with someone, he said they were personally aware of Reagan administration era intelligence officials who are connected to Bill Barr and James Comey. The net of the conversation being those were the type of people being targeted by Patrick's efforts previously. And it appears Patrick is successful given at least initial media reports. Patrick jokingly said his efforts were a suicide mission for sure, and he's glad to still be alive. He also noted we shouldn't forget about the Clinton Foundation involvement in Haiti. And there's quite a bit, by the way, that's come out about that, including the Clinton Foundation employee, the woman that was in Haiti that got busted with the 33 kids. And no, I'm not saying 33 just to be melodramatic. It was 33 kids. She was in a Haitian prison. Hey, V.
Hey, buddy.
She was in a Haitian prison. Clinton Foundation got her out. And then my personal favorite, what is that woman doing right now? Well, she helps run the Amber Alert system across the United States.
Are you kidding me?
I'm dead serious.
Oh, my God.
It's a cult. To those claiming Charlie Kirk, his organizations, and those who support it are a dangerous cult who threaten academic freedom. Were you not the same folks taking a knee for BLM because of your white guilt, who in some cases occurred hundreds of years before your relatives got here? I'm just asking. Money making and fame. Trust but verify on this one, folks. However, it speaks to a narrative we've heard many times. The minute the government, powerful or both, are involved, there's going to be strong efforts to game the system. For instance, the family members of Congress members making investments based on closed-door meetings and closed-door hearings. If you do that, you go to jail. By the way, I have a website for you at the end of today's program where you can see in real time the investments by members of your own government.
It's so nice.
Shifting, yes. But you can make money off it. Shifting to a different topic, let's shift yet again to how foreign nationals on U.S. soil who've been sneaking into the country are being exploited. For instance, there's public domain information proving activist organizations during the Metro protests in 2020 and other incidents trained and used individuals under the age of 18 by design. Some of those individuals were also foreign nationals. The reason being prosecution was much less likely, especially if their situation regarding parents was vague and especially their national origin. So where does this lead us? Well, it leads us to the website Crazy Days and Nights and a comment about that topic they had recently. And I'm quoting from that post. The family of porn stars is about to be taken down because they've been making millions of dollars a year running facilities for migrant children and then using those children not only for unpaid labor, but also selling them and forcing them to make movies, which are then sold. Not only are they making money from these third-party government contracts, but through every other thing they can think of to use them. Apparently, they also use them to run drugs for this family, knowing that if they get caught, they'll end up right back in the clutches of the family. Now, some of you out there in the audience might guess who that family might be, and NT, who runs that site, has not yet revealed who it is. But I would tell you that most of you, and without my colleagues, Algo and V, offering any ideas on the air, let's just say that's probably 3 or 4 families we all could think of.
Who do you think it is?
I'm not saying on the air. But we've heard of that sort of thing before.
Interesting.
That website may not be what you think it is. And this is both sad and hilarious. For over a decade, it's been revealed the CIA operated a large network of covert websites that served as a global spy terminals disguised as harmless blogs, news websites, and fan pages. Beginning in 2004, the CIA established a network of at least over 880 websites who ranged in content from Johnny Carson and Star Wars fan pages to online message boards about Rastafari. Spanning 29 languages and targeting at least 36 countries directly, these websites were aimed not only at adversaries such as China, Venezuela, and Russia, but also allied nations including France, Italy, and Spain, showing that the United States treats its friends much like its enemies. In one example from a recent article on this, an Iranian national offered to turn over data to U.S. intelligence. These websites, among various tradecraft, included locations on the page that if you clicked it the right number of times, a data field would come up. And then after entering your password and your credentials, it would take you to a dedicated page on that website just for you, which enabled them to keep track of what each of these different spies, if you will, were sending the agency. And then that way everybody was firewalled off from each other. The problem is an Iranian double agent clued in his country on this practice, and because of how poorly the websites were developed, entire networks and people were compromised. One of the other mistakes the CIA made was they purchased all of the IP addresses for the website in bulk. This resulted in all of the IP addresses of the CIA sites all being in numerical order. Other countries were then able to alert each other. Even if a particular website did not appeal to the people in their country, it would appeal to another country. The outcome for the Iranians who took part was long prison sentences. When China quickly discovered these sites, they executed everyone connected to the program who was Chinese. Way to go, boys. But the science. When it comes to topics like Tylenol, let's also remember, folks, despite the known things it will do to you, people are still taking Ozempic. It's about caution with medications, not blind loyalty solely because the person sending the message you've been told by your side is someone you're not to like, particularly the lady who evidently, if indeed the story is true, took a whole bunch of Tylenol and may have killed herself. Race for nuclear power. Per oilprice.com, we have the following to throw on the pile of the advocacy coverage in the media. In the article, Race to Reinvent U.S. Nuclear Power, the article highlights the aging U.S. nuclear power plants that are out there, who is factually correct, of course, and they do supply a considerable amount of power to the existing grids in the United States. The solution, according to the article, is, say it with me, small modular reactors, SMRs, and building them with, say it with me, 3D printing. The U.S., according to the article, is working to triple our current output through is working to triple our current output, though instead of mentioning AI, the purpose is stated as climate and energy security goals. Challenges with building large-scale nuclear facilities like we used to do in the U.S. is cited as a bureaucratic and upfront cost nightmare. The way to overcome that is to leverage 3D manufactured materials and construction approved by the Energy Department and build smaller integrated plants. I'd like to note the 3D manufacturing item is being tested by Oak Ridge in Tennessee, and those folks do know nuclear. Just contributing another bit of information on the nuclear topic. And for those of you on Discord, my thanks again to Knight and others who, my God, you folks must be posting at least 15 articles a week, all of which are top-notch, about various pluses and minuses about our power grid, who's doing what, and which federal agency just authorized what. Archaeology news. A lot of chatter and arguing going on out there relative to Göbekli Tepe in Turkey and the other Tepe-named sites. Some claim there's an outright repression of new discoveries. Others working on the site claim things take time and discoveries are not made on a timetable. Often in these situations, there's truth to both sides, especially when the Turkish financial organization managing the site is in bed with the World Economic Forum. That said, they found another Tepe site to be added to the long list. This one is called Mendik Tepe, M-E-N-D-I-K. And you may recall in a prior program, I covered all the known Tepe sites who are part of the overall site. Tepe, by the way, meaning hill in Turkish. Initial reports say this site may be older than Göbekli Tepe, which is more than possible given the fact that Karahan Tepe at the site is known to be older. The overall issue with all sites who are part of the complex is many have not been excavated, much less studied. The real stunning part of Göbekli Tepe and its associated sites is Göbekli Tepe cannot be argued it is younger than 10,000 years old. A benchmark academia has been holding on to for more than 100 years that no civilization could possibly be older than 10,000 years, because that would mean it predated the Ice Age. And we all know there is no such thing. Feelings versus truth. If you convince people that feelings override biology, then they'll also start calling their feelings truth. From a recent Google data chart, there's a chart that reflecting a trend of her truth rising alongside people who self-identify in various ways. I've seen this firsthand at certain universities where they're obsessed with words and implied intent instead of outcomes. Or my personal favorite, the louder I am, the more right I am, because that's the way it works. Moving on from appetizers to our main
That's
item.
my truth. That's my truth. Sorry, I just had to.
What the hell was that?
I'm speaking on my truth.
Okay.
I know what he's referencing. And it ain't pretty. Charlie again. I think one of the harder things for all of us to get our heads around is the way in which our world works. Even those of us who are open to some of the stranger ideas out there have a hard time with some of these details. The following theory may be flat wrong, but to paraphrase Babylon 5, it has just enough legitimacy who, even if it is wrong, still makes it very plausible. We'll start at a different time and place to lay some groundwork. When the Las Vegas shooting occurred in 2017, there were a couple of key items to consider. At a very high level, was it just a crazed lone gunman? And if so, how could such an individual turn a room at a Vegas hotel into a virtual fortress and no one noticed? If there was a target, and if so, who was the target? And was the target, in fact, MBS, aka Mohammed bin Salman, the leader of Saudi Arabia? Then the piece of that historical event who's often the bigger focus for Veles, logistics. This is the old saying about armchair warriors talk about tactics, but real leaders discuss logistics. All the intent and committed people to carry out such an act in the world are irrelevant in the face of logistics. Such logistics are already in place, and that is always a challenge for the average person mentally. Even a high-level consideration of such a fact would reveal a lot of money and resources to keep such mechanisms constantly operating. Not to mention the fact it would mean the deployment of resources to disrupt companies, elected officials, or assassinate people must be occurring far more often than is believed. An excellent example who proves those assets exist can be found in several books about the drug trade, particularly shutting people up who are trying to report on it or saw things they shouldn't. An example is the book Clinton, Bush, and the CIA Conspiracies by Sean Atwood. It, like several other books, factually covers several murders of people near rail lines who saw narcotics being dropped off. Turning to Charlie Kirk, we have a lot of the clues we've seen in other situations. There's a convenient patsy who may or may not have been conditioned by MKUltra-like methods. We have a black hole around when that person's behavior appears to have shifted. We have details covered on my prior program about the killing itself, from inconsistencies about evidence to numerical significances who often appear when something like this occurs. The following is a data point I missed on my program last week when I was covering the numbers 3 or 33. Charlie died 33 days before his birthday, and my thanks to a listener who pointed that out. Since that program aired, we also have details sneaking through about private jets flying out of the area shortly after and similar strange movements of people. Some of that private jet traffic also flying through native Indian reservations. That's notable as more and more details have been forthcoming in the last few years about the degree to which those sovereign nations inside the United States have been leveraged by the intelligence community. This does not mean those individuals on those flights, if they're truly involved, were the true shooter or shooters. They may, in fact, simply be logistics and planning support personnel getting out of there after the mission is over. Lastly, a very interesting theory has been floated. Again, it may be true or simply good but incorrect hypothesis. There's a valid hypothesis Charlie Kirk's killing does not relate to the Levant, campus activism, American culture, or a number of other proposed reasons. Potentially the reason why he was removed is because he was directly involved in putting both J.D. Vance and RFK onto the White House staff, particularly because of the impact RFK is having on the profits of the pharmaceutical industry and large agricultural corporations. Recall what I said previously about the profits of the organizations we're talking about. Pfizer alone went in 1 year from $40 billion to $80 billion in revenue. I'm pretty sure I've seen governments overthrown for industries worth less than $40 billion or increased revenue. This week's announcement about Tylenol was something you could watch in real time on Bloomberg or whatever your favorite business channel may be. The stock just nosedived, who's ironic when you consider it was not said to avoid Tylenol entirely. Just it may cause autism in your children if you take it while pregnant. All other uses are still on the table, at least for now. This is the same industry where a year after Pfizer announced a revenue increase from 40 to 80 billion, the only question the markets had was, hey, Pfizer, how are you going to keep sustaining that revenue? No concern about the public health, the reduction in COVID cases or similar. That isn't isolated. If you saw the documentary called The Corporation, there's a scene where a commodities trader said when the World Trade Center was on fire during 9/11, the only thing his leadership wanted to know was, how much is gold up? Do we have other Tylenol statements forthcoming? And I don't just mean Tylenol, I mean other products. We shall see, but if you represent a threat to folks like this, it appears with Charlie, we may have a reason. What is power? A professor of mine asked a group of Air Force intelligence folks, what is power? Being that kind of audience, they asked for qualification on the question around what kind of power are we talking about. Once that was out of the way, she asked this question to make an example. Does Cuba have political or international power? The consensus was that country had very limited power based on my classmates. She challenged us by pointing out power is not always what the Western mind thinks it is, and you need to understand soft power when it comes to long-term goals. Her example was the U.S. for decades, as part of the embargo on Cuba, offered citizenship to anyone from Cuba who could escape. As those most desiring to escape would be people with valuable skills, it would deny Cuba the very people they needed to get the country running. Please see the real reason why they built the wall in East Germany. During a period of negotiations with the U.S., the government of Cuba released people who wanted to leave the island. What wasn't stated by either Cuba or the U.S. was a large portion of the emigres were also people let out of prison, people in mental hospitals, and similar. This created a considerable logistics burden on the United States. The Cuban government ceased doing that when the U.S. quietly agreed to some of Cuba's requests. Now consider the periodic inflows of people into the U.S. during the last administration. My normal caution as well is do not view this in terms of either political party being good or bad. The most recent president who deported the most foreign nationals out of the United States was actually Barack Obama. We had people from Jamaica being moved to one part of the United States recently, people from Venezuela being moved to other places like Colorado, and people from Somalia being moved to Minnesota, among others. Who benefits from that? There's no real government in Somalia, and therefore that activity is not a political move by the Somali leadership. In some of these cases, those migrations took pressure off of those countries by removing people who were a burden to them. In a particularly wicked move, a ton of folks left El Salvador, that country's economy improved, then they strengthened their prison system, and then the U.S. sent those people right back to El Salvador who were immediately incarcerated. The current state of the United States with foreign nationals is first and foremost a problem who at this scale, key words, at this scale has been going on for more than 20 years. I know. I was a contractor to DHS when I was part of a project to create a guest worker program. All those people in the U.S. unfortunately boil down to a handful of things. First, it's slave labor, pure and simple, because they can be exploited easily. Second, the extensiveness of that labor is beyond what most of you in our audience would imagine as far as where they're being used or leveraged. Third, someone is making money bringing them into the U.S., whether from their home countries wanting to get rid of them or by others wishing to get paid for moving them. Fourth, money will be made on those who are being sent back. Fifth, there are many elements of power in all of this. Lastly, this is Europe, the U.S., Canada, and others, not just the United States. Further, this is why countries like Japan become very agitated when folks start talking about immigration of whom they have very little. Value of data. A little refresh. You have several industries where the product is not the big revenue generator. In fact, you may even lose money on the product. Some examples include printers for your home or office, aircraft engines, medical scanners, to name a few. How is money made then when there's no profitability on the device? It's in the service, it's in the spare parts, or it's in both. With printers, simply said, it's the ink. There's a lot of examples like this. In the 1990s, while working in the telecom sector, many of us became aware of a firm called Broadcom. Broadcom did not make telecommunications gear like switches and routers, but instead made the specialized computer chips that went into them. A very nice business akin to working in the arms industry. You don't make or use the final product, you just make the parts that go into building it. They were led in those years by a very colorful CEO who prevented employees from using elevators and wanted everyone, including himself, to use the stairs. He was all about fitness and long hours. One of those Silicon Valley types who reveled in the fact everyone, including him, was working over 100 hours a week. A few jobs ago for Veles, I managed large IT implementations for manufacturers, consumer product companies, and the list goes on. I learned very quickly, though, the tools we deployed to help those customers run more effectively were important. There was a byproduct, and that byproduct was data. In the 1970s or 80s, that data might have also been valuable, but the means of studying it didn't really exist in a way who could be done efficiently. It would have to be performed by employees who were time-consuming and had to be checked frequently for errors. And then, of course, there's the cost of using your personnel. Therefore, only the most important aspects of a company or an organization could afford to be studied. Thanks to not just computers and software, but things like artificial intelligence tools, the means of studying data have improved considerably. I would point out, of course, we still need the human element. It also importantly enabled study of very granular aspects of organizations and things who are important to know, but no one was able to spend the time or the money to analyze data down to that level. And then, of course, the costs came down. When I was working with Mack Truck, the excitement was notable if a logical way was found to improve highway mileage by 1 or 2 miles per gallon. That may not sound important to your average person driving a car or a pickup truck, but when you're talking about a tractor-trailer truck carrying 150 to 200 gallons of diesel, now you have someone's attention. Multiply that by a fleet of 50 to 200 trucks, and now you really have someone's attention. The other advantage of data study who's not been attempted previously was for things called outliers or corner cases. The best example of that, in my experience, has been Apple. When I was working on a contract with Apple, I quickly understood why they sought very distinct types of consumers. An easy one is the demand in Asia for gold-colored phone cases. For all you Anglo-Saxons out there in the US, that may seem minor as it's just the color of a phone case. In the culture of Asia, it's a very big deal, and people will pay. Say it with me. They'll pay a premium. The work I performed for Apple via my firm's project for them was something who enabled better targeting of those outlier corner case consumers because they'll pay a premium for a unique or special access of or special aspects of their products. This will be very important in a moment. So let's turn to V and Algo's program from Monday, where they delved into the dust-up over Twitter. TikTok. More specifically, some people in the Levant are benefiting from that. What is your root cause analysis? It's about the data, my friends. Brendan O'Connell, although it's Brendan, in his work covering the various goings-on in the Levant, frequently plays a clip of Benjamin Netanyahu making the statement, cyber. Cyber is a real domain of power. Yes, he did say that, and he said it a lot. In fact, from 2014 to 2017 and beyond, he's discussed the importance of cyber to the foreign policy of Israel on numerous occasions. It's one of those let's step back for a moment and look at the forest in this as well. He's never made statements like that and said, because we have to protect our country from Iran. He's never made a statement like that and then said to protect ourselves from international hackers. No, he said it because it's a foreign policy of the country. Let me say that again. It's a foreign policy aspect of the country. You may now rub your chins and consider the implications for Intel's chip plant, recent investments of billions of dollars by NVIDIA into Intel, and a laundry list of things, including TikTok. In 2017, Benjamin Netanyahu stated at a cyber conference in Israel, and I quote, "A few years ago, I set the goal for Israel of becoming one of the top 5 cybersecurity powers in the world. It's a goal we have met." That was in 2017. It was 8 years ago. It's about the ability to acquire raw data any way they can and have the means to analyze it and make use of it. What is another valuable way to acquire data? By having backdoors in computer processors chips, especially at the data center level, like those made by Intel. One of the other Jeff Epsteins. I did have more Epstein content for today. I just wasn't able to develop it. I apologize. I'll have it on another program. There's a point when considering Jeff Epstein and the types of networks he operated where one can wonder how far back does this go. The simple answer is it goes as far back as people's morality can be blackmailed. If smoking a cigarette got you in trouble on a Sunday before church in the early 1800s, it took something stronger by the 1930s or 60s to still compromise someone. A great place to begin is digging deeply into the history of Hollywood from its beginnings to now. It's a real chicken and the egg scenario. Did Hollywood start blackmail programs to just keep actors and actresses in line until the intelligence community showed up and expanded it, or was intelligence there from the beginning? There's a lot to consider when it comes to J. Edgar Hoover and his use of blackmail developed by the FBI field agents in that question. Again, to simplify, if you're going to develop blackmail networks, you'll want to blackmail people of value. The irony is that J. Edgar Hoover was blackmailing people through what his FBI agents developed, but yet Hoover was being blackmailed himself by the mafia to keep the FBI off their back. Politicians, people of great wealth, religious officials, and similar are always a good place to start with blackmail. This is where the subject takes us to an era I remember very well. This would be the era of tie-dye, pastel colors, MTV, great music, and the recovery of the United States from what was called the era of malaise. Yes, folks, I'm talking about the 1980s. During that period, and long before, we even heard of Jeff Epstein, was another guy named Craig Spence, a man who's part of a pattern of people like Epstein, and not Epstein as a distraction, as a standalone event or individual. Craig was a wealthy lobbyist in Washington, D.C. and socialite. He He also ran a sexual blackmail operation leveraging underage boys who would go on what were called midnight tours of the White House. Those of you who know of the books like The Franklin Scandal or The Franklin Cover-Up by John W. DeCamp will be able to piece together what was one of the supply networks for these boys. As I lived through those years, what was the distraction and disinformation? Several media organizations in those years had breaking stories, keyword breaking stories, about what was known as the House of Representatives scandal around pages. These would be young men and women, often college students, who took unpaid internships in D.C. to become pages running errands for members of the House. The controversy, remembering that era and its social mores, was young men having sex with elected officials. As I've said previously, you use a bad scandal to cover up a much worse scandal, and this is such an example. When Spence had these underage boys involved in sex with government officials, often it was at his house. And just like Epstein, guess what? The house had two-way mirrors. Everything was filmed and recorded, and it was all used as part of a massive blackmail operation. What else occurred with Craig Spence is when his ring was exposed, he died in a strange death who was ruled what? Yes, a suicide. Prior to his death, Spence told people he worked with the whole thing was a CIA operation to compromise intelligence officials and foreign diplomats. The 1980s, a large-scale operation with children and sex to compromise high-profile people. Where have I heard that before recently? In France, Canada, and the U.S. Spence also told his colleagues he knew William Casey, the CIA director, was out to get him. Bringing up the Nebraska angle and other states where these boys were sourced, recall over a dozen key people in those investigations died under strange circumstances. Noting both what we know and suspect about Epstein and these blackmail operations, a Tennessee representative, Tim Burchett, recently said many House members' votes on bills are based on compromising material held on them by powerful foreign and domestic interests. Note the subtlety in that statement. Foreign and domestic, and that does not necessarily mean governments. When your government and country are running on blackmail, to quote a t-shirt I own with the logo of Dunkin' Donuts, checks and balances don't apply. A small bit of humor on such a serious topic. What was the number one problem back in the early 2000s with recent college graduates working for intelligence agencies? They kept using the tools used to keep the spy tools that they had access to in order to keep tabs on their former dating partners, essentially not creeping on an ex with Facebook, but with the taxpayers' spy satellites. Several training programs were run to get those behaviors under control. Irony that the people running the most powerful intelligence gathering tools ever devised in known human history also have no impulse control and juvenile behavior. Lastly, in fairness to those caught up in things like this, whether Spence, Epstein, or a host of other things, let me remind us about the movie The Forgotten with Julianne Moore. Some of you have seen it and others not. Without giving away the plot, a woman and a guy she knows, remember they have children, and those children are missing. Everyone in their lives, from spouses to therapists, tell them this is all their imagination. They find they're being followed, and it turns out the guy is one of many intelligence agency people keeping an eye on them. They capture him, take him to an isolated cabin. The male character clocks the agent across the jaw while he's tied to a chair, a typical male reaction, if you will. Julianne Moore's character tells him to stop. She kneels next to the agent in the chair and asks him if he has kids, and he says he does. She says all they want is their kids back, and they won't tell anyone. The agent tells them, "You want the truth, and the truth just isn't going to fit in your brain." She whispers in his ear, "No one will know what you've told us." He softly says, "They're listening." And then he in the chair yanked out of the building into the sky, never to be seen again. What we're fighting is perhaps not that bad, but the stakes are just as high. Regardless of whatever your personal beliefs may be, we need to continually take on the armor of the Lord, to use an old phrase, to fight these sort of things, because they're far more vast and far more historical than any of us really want to deal with it. With that, Algo, would you pull up the Capital Trades website? Algo. There we go. So this website, folks, is a second one. We provided another one previously. There is this one and another one we provided previously that allow you in real time to see who's trading what where. And this is all one word, capitaltrades.com. So again, we're not dispensing investment advice, but that said, it is a tool you can use, and we've shared on prior shows. There are folks out there for whom just monitoring government officials' stock purchases is how they do their thing. You may not be able to get in on as quickly as elected officials will, but you can still make a buck if you get in on time.
I was going to say, I don't know if it's real time or if it's recent time. I'm not sure.
I would say recent.
Yeah.
To be real time, we'd need to be the NSA. But anyway,
Yeah, they're not taking advantage of that, are they?
No, not at all. Somebody was shorting airline stocks right before 9/11. You don't say. And then the second website for all of you today is one I've mentioned on other programs. And that, Algo, if you'll pull that one up, this is the open source intelligence website for all. And we'll have it in the chat and in the write-up for the show. I know it looks very tiny there. Hang on just a tick. Let me open that thing on my end. Yeah, and it's kind of a weird...
I zoomed in.
Okay. I was going to say, it's kind of a weird website. The URL for this one is https:// start.me/the letter P/the letter L, capital L, the number 1, lowercase r, capital E, capital Y, capital Q, /OSINT, the number 4, ALL. And this thing is huge, folks. It's breaking down various websites either by maps, search engines, unified search tools. My personal favorite in the upper left-hand corner is if you need to create, if you've ever heard of a burner phone, if you have to create a throwaway contact information for yourself, just below that is ID generator. There's a section for websites to help you find people. The search engine list is the whole length of the page. And then a little further down on the far right is a GEO section, which is a whole lot of geospatial intelligence sites. Center left, further down the page is sections on email, a variety of different email tools that you can use. There's cryptocurrency tools. There's productivity tools for those of you in the IT world. There's a series of phone websites, everything from reverse phone lookups to identifying who may have just called you. If one, as the old saying goes, if one website doesn't work, try another one. A little further down, center right, is a section called Image, Video, Audio, and Media. A lot of image websites where you can pull up different images of things you may want. File upload sites, voter databases. There's a section on license plate, vehicle identification number, and vehicle websites. Flight tracking data, finance data, business data, maritime data, download tools to help you download large files, a bunch of privacy and security content. There's a bunch of police and law enforcement sites further way down on the right. Secure communications, data sets, just a section called resources, which is just like basically a free-for-all of anything that didn't fit in the other categories. Let's see here. We've got a number of sex offender websites on the far right-hand side, even further down. Public record websites, that's a real good one. So a whole bunch there. Series of world clocks. Then on the far left-hand side, about 3/4 way down the page, is a threat and intelligence series of pages. Government pages. I mean, you'll go crazy just trying to go through all this stuff. There's so much here. The point in showing this to all of you this is like the mother lode of every kind of website for any kind of use you might ever need. So give that a look.
They even have dorking.
Yes.
What's dorking? I don't know what dorking is. I'm afraid to find out, to be honest with
I
you.
don't think we want to press that button.
Well, we're already on the NSA's list for other stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
Hi,
I've also
Utah. How you doing?
well, yeah, I put the links in the comments section for those of you who know how to do that. I also put these links in the description, the video description, so they're in there as well.
Excellent.
Then, of course, he spelled them out for the rest of us. We were joking before the show. I couldn't even find myself, who I'm pretty good at this stuff, and I needed a link from yesterday's show, and I couldn't figure out how to get the comments up. It took me like 10 minutes.
Where is it's the age-old problem of I know it's in here somewhere. So yeah, and for some of these websites, to what we were just chatting about a moment ago and noting Rob B's comment in the chat section, for some of these, quite serious, you may want to look up the term first before you click the button, especially if you're at work. I don't want anybody getting fired because you're looking at something that we told you about on the show. But anyway, wrapping up comment here, folks, from me is, let's see here, next week, Friday the 3rd, no show for me. I will not have a show on October 3rd. Veles is tired. Veles needs a break. My respect, as always, goes out to Algo and V and Luongo and many others who do content every day or several times a week. It's why I have great respect for Mike Moore with his young bucks, as he calls them, constantly helping him put shows together in his little round table he has with his team about what they're going to cover and what they're not going to cover on his programs. But I thank you all for spending time with us today, and I wish you all well. And what do you call it? Algo, anything before we wrap?
No. I mean, I wrote some things down.
Sure.
The Union Gold is just a reminder of how Veles will grab hold like a bulldog and never let go. Along with the FOIAs every 6 months or so.
Of which I just had a reminder pop up during the show, reminding me to go hit Georgia again about the Guidestones, because
Exactly.
they keep telling me no every month. No, we're not doing it. Yes, but I have the legal right to ask you again. And here's me asking you again. And yeah, me also hitting the Pacer website and checking on the Finders legal case, because now that come next week we're in October, that'll have been 2 full months that there's been no activity on that case, and I can only imagine how much documentation the poor judge is having to go through. This is the missing Union Gold from the Civil War, and the feds saying there's no truth to the rumor we found anything, the judge saying I want these records, them saying no you don't, and it'll take us 75 years, the judge threatening federal lawyers, and then the feds showing up and giving the judge everything he asked for, but telling him it's in camera, meaning, Your Honor, you now have to review it in your chambers and determine whether or not it's even germane to this case, but we don't want it made public. And it's like, really? You don't say.
Yeah. Oh, I see. There's also when you were talking about who's the guy, Comey?
Comey.
You said the word conviction. I think you meant indictment. I just wanted to
Indictment. I'm terribly
make
sorry.
sure everybody didn't
Dear God, before you get a knock on the door.
Bottles. Yeah. We covered capital trades. The lady with the Tylenol, she also she's pregnant also, and the child may not make it. I put that very irreverent meme in our private chat.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's just whatever Trump says not to do, they're going to do. So I think they should just have Trump go out there and tell everybody that conservative values are evil.
And whatever you do, don't start your own small business.
Yeah, don't start your own small business.
Go, and for whatever you do, the most evil thing on the planet is trade schools. Don't even look at a trade school.
No trade schools.
Hey, look, we have welders.
Just basically go be Kamala Harris.
Right.
The the black hole before the behavior of the alleged shooter, the black hole in behavior, like where they kind of disappeared for a while, that reminded me of Mangione, because
Yeah.
Mangione, who shot the United Healthcare CEO, he was like kind of a star. That guy was, I think he had finished university. He was in some pretty good circles, and he was really doing well. And then he talked about getting into psilocybin mushrooms,
Hmm.
and then he like disappeared for a few months, and then pops up with a ghost gun that also had like a suppressor. And so
Right.
yeah, you know, I mean, what happened in those few months? He started taking mind altering drugs and disappeared off the planet, and you know,
And who's one of the biggest drug dealers and suppliers in America?
oh gosh, I don't know. Who would that be?
Some agencies.
Certain agencies.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
mean,
it's yeah, the missing time thing. And I don't mean UFO abductions. Yeah, these even if you go back, God, 10 years ago, some of these strange college town shootings we had and similar, where um, there's one in particular, but I don't want to name it by name. But it was the one on a prior show, folks, where basically it was the brother and sister team who
Yep.
kept getting interviewed at each of these shootings, and then it turned out later she's working for she's like a news announcer on reads the news on several local TV stations, whether in Virginia or places close to the Beltway, and then her brother was working for a defense contractor. And they were wearing like different styles of clothes, and she had different hair color, but it's the two of them over and over and over again, always getting interviewed. Dare one say crisis actors, but in a number of those shootings, it's the individual who carried out those acts of violence is going to a clinical therapist, and then people start filing FOIAs. Good for you. Start filing FOIAs saying, hey, is that the same clinical therapist who has had these other patients? Well, that's client-patient privilege. We can't reveal that. Right. Well, let's look at other records. You need to stop poking around those records. It's like, well, wait a minute. And I mean this sincerely. Somebody somewhere in time made the correlation that, what was it, Sirhan, psychologist, was the same guy taking care of John Hinckley. It was something like that. And David Chapman, who shot John Lennon, that you have these same folks that are either that's the other one, are you receiving money from foundations? You can't possibly say that's client privilege. And then you would find some strange charity organization or what have you, whose money directly traces back to the Beltway or Beltway connected law firms.
Yeah, fronts for who knows who. Rob B, as far as taking the psilocybin mushrooms, it's not about the mushrooms themselves. It's about somebody who may start going down a path, and then other people take over their life. And
Yes.
then while they're under the influence of, they might start with mushrooms and then they go to who knows what else, maybe, acid or something. And before you know it, they're, in a room and they're being, their mind's being washed. And it's not about taking mushrooms. The
Quick note on that before we move to another topic.
Sure.
The other topic I would raise, folks, on that is I had people reporting to me when we all had security clearances, and one of my younger staff members went out in the parking lot, had a parking lot conversation with me and said, what is the big deal if one of us or some of us are smoking marijuana or whatever? And I said, not a thing. And he's like, then why is this such a big deal on security questioning? And if depending on the nature of your clearance, that you're doing some sort of polygraph. And I said, simple. They're not worried about the fact that you're using narcotics, depending on the nature of the narcotic. They don't want you taking heroin. But I'm like, they don't really care whether or not you're smoking a joint or you're drinking alcohol. They care a whole lot who your dealer is. They care a whole lot who might be able to blackmail you. So if you've got a drinking problem and you've got local cops and judges that are kind of cleaning that up for you, that's a problem, because you could be blackmailed and compromised, noting my earlier comments about blackmail. If you've got a dealer, that's a great way to compromise and blackmail you. And then the other thing, obviously, is, as we saw with Lincoln Park in Canada and some of the other MK Ultra like programs, very easy to slip stuff in.
Yeah, and here's the thing about it: not everybody's going to have the same reaction to drugs. That's a well-known thing in pharmacology. So there is a percentage of the population that they're already mentally unstable. So, these kinds of drugs can push them over the edge. And, there's other people who were, I knew a dude from when I was young, and that guy just like, what's the word I'm looking for? Indiscriminately did drugs all the time. And that guy's mind was solid. He could take it. So, not everybody's the same.
Well, and as
Um,
Keith Richards often says, you have to do this very carefully.
um, yeah, Keith Richards, that guy did all the drugs. Like, I don't think there's any left.
We're in the words of Robin Williams. The question we all need to ask ourselves is, what sort of world are we leaving for Keith Richards?
Yeah, that guy like survived the dinosaurs. As far as the possible pharma connection to Kirk, or if anybody's ever watched Michael Clayton, have you seen that one? V? It's
V's off.
oh, I meant Veles. Have you seen Michael Clayton with Clooney?
Oh yeah, great film. I got a whole bunch of people that I've mentored over the years who are like, "How do I become that guy?" And it's like, you don't want to be that guy.
Yeah, that's like the last guy you want to be.
That is, but I want to be a fixer, and it's like I've known people who kind of have that job, especially in management consulting worlds, and I'm like, you need a level of mental strength and flexibility, and also, or to quote John Cusack from Grosse Pointe Blank, moral flexibility.
Great movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a little bit of truth in that movie too. Like in that particular speech, there you learn a little bit about where they're getting their guys. The Tylenol thing, they said. By the way, Michael Clayton, the way that they take out a particular guy, it's just the whole premise of the film. What I got from that film is how realistic that scenario could be, and the way they portrayed. I'm like, oh, well, this probably goes on. So definitely watch that. And that's, I'd say, any corporation with billions of dollars at stake. You got Tylenol.
I can also weigh in on that one to say even medium-sized companies that are public or not publicly traded in the Midwest. I've been there a couple of times where something happens, or it's going to happen, and people who've been working for that firm for years, they're a vice president, they're a senior vice president, they know where all the bodies are, they know every good and bad thing that ever happened at that company. And then something happens that just, they turn pale. And it's because somebody showed up who scared somebody on the board of directors. And the person who showed up and scared somebody on the board of directors is, quote unquote, a fixer. But they're a person often with a lawyer or is a lawyer who are working for private equity. And it's like that scene from The Insider, where, you've all heard me say this on a million shows. Is Dr. Wygant telling the truth about cigarettes? Yes. Are we going to air it on 60 Minutes? No. Why? Because the more truth he tells, the worse it gets. What's the real problem? And this is, I think, a subtlety missed in that film. Because I've bumped into people who say, oh, yeah, a cigarette company owns CBS News. And it's like, oh, no. No. Bailiff, play back the testimony. No, what it was, a private equity firm owned CBS News and the cigarette manufacturer. That's a much bigger problem. And that's also why all this stuff is so interlocking that you just, like, I don't mean you can't get anything done, but it's like everybody's in bed with everybody else. And so therefore nothing can ever get done.
You could call that conflict of interest contagion. With the Tylenol thing, they told everybody themselves on Twitter, don't take it if you're pregnant. Like, this isn't news.
And just this morning, and
this was years ago, by the way.
Yes. And I hate to say this, folks, before everybody gets, to what I said earlier, and I've said on some other shows, and others out there, not just me, others out there in the alternative space have talked about this. Everybody is so conditioned that you hear something. It's like, well, where did that come from? Well, the White House said it. Well, then hell, I'm not paying any attention to it, regardless of who's in the White House. Or it came from this place, or it came from this university, or it came from this area of the country, or it came out of Chicago, or it came out of Nashville, whatever it may be. And we're also colored that we can't even rationally, we might say, okay, that's probably not true. but I'm going to go invest the time to go double check whether or not that's true or not. Somebody dug up this morning, as is always the case when these things happen, somebody dug up this morning a John Hopkins report from years ago that said, here are all the things that could, keyword, that could happen with not just Tylenol, but any of the over-the-counter drugs. Now, as I've had to explain to my own kids, the problem with these topics, like let's say cough medicine, when I was growing up in the 70s and the 80s, my family doctor, who'd been around as long as time, told my mom, you do understand these cough medicines are like really weak. And she's like, what do you mean? Well, I mean, not to be indelicate, you've got fat kids, thin kids, kids from different ethnic backgrounds that are going to react differently to certain medicines. So in order to protect themselves, the companies who make over-the-counter drugs, depending on the nature of the drug, they will water it down, if you will, to make sure, so it's like for your kids at their age and height and weight, I'd recommend you give them this dose, even though the bottle says whatever. And that's when you have doctors that actually give a crap and aren't just reading off the 3x5 card. It's the same way with this topic of Tylenol. I've heard for years stories about Advil, Excedrin, all the major over-the-counter, I think the word is analgesics, and Tylenol. And some of these reactions could be due to how much was taken, when it was taken, what it mixed with, or whatever. But in our, must fit in a small box world, nobody wants to do the research. And so it's just, don't take it at all. And that not necessarily is the right course of action either. But are there risks with any of these drugs? Yes. It's kind of like some of the folks I've worked with that are in high pressure industries. And I've like had to take it again out the parking lot. And it's like, I need you to get off the damn energy drinks. Well, I'm only drinking 2 a day. And it's like, you're 25, your body still is able to recover from things that would kill me. But it's like your liver and your kidneys are always the places these drugs or those energy drinks are going to cause harm. So, and somebody even made the argument that Tylenol was invented in 1950s or whatever, and we didn't know autism existed until 1901 or whatever. That's all distracting information. They've found Egyptian mummies with cancer. I mean, there are things that just happen to us, but depending on who you are, and I remember the famous episode of MASH, the TV show, where the character Klinger, who was Lebanese, is having, I think he had a sickle cell anemia-like reaction, and all the doctors were confused because it's like, this can't be, because only African Americans have that problem. And at the end of the episode is one of those few MASH episodes where the screen went black and white text came up and said, it was during the Korean War, it was realized there are other ethnic groups who do suffer ailments that were traditionally only associated with one particular ethnic group. And it's the same thing with any of these drugs. There's certain drugs that you shouldn't take depending on what your ethnic background is. But again, as we often say on Rogue, and it's been said by many, many, many other people in the alternative space, you've got to do your own research. You got to get a doctor who is not just going off the binder because they don't want to get sued. You got to have, it's like, look, my ethnic background also includes this. Is that a problem? Well, why would it? It's like, well, don't start. Then I need another doctor. And this is why the homeopathic folks, again, are another good source, not the only source, but whether it's herbs or other things. But that's even true of natural herbal remedies. There's certain people I know that will get an allergic reaction to some things that other folks won't. It's just the nature of being human. But, like everything else in our lives, we just, and I know it's a message nobody wants to hear. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to deal with it myself. But we've just got to research this stuff more thoroughly. Because, all of these products, any product out there, those products are based on liability. There's no other way to say it. It's kind of like an HR rep I knew at GE who I deeply appreciated for his honesty. When a bunch of people in the room are like, we should help people. And he slams his hand on the table and looks at everybody at a meeting in White Plains, New York, and goes, we're human resources. I don't care what you think we do here. Our job is not to help people. Our job is to fire people. Our job is to remove human risk from this business. I don't care whether or not you're having a good day. I care whether or not you're going to harm this company. Oh, I know what we're supposed to be doing officially, but really, our job is to fire you at the first sign you're a problem.
Oh yeah, yeah. As to these drugs, I married a naturopath, so we probably want to distinguish between a naturopath and a homeopath. Um, and there, I'd say just go look that up. Homeopath, they have a different thing altogether, and I'm not putting it down. In fact, there are sometimes I take homeopathic medicine, and maybe many consider it a scam. And if I were a doctor who went through medical school, I would say it's completely a scam. But let's just say I don't think it's a scam. Point being, naturopaths are the ones who are going to more be giving you herbs and such things like that. And I go that route as a default. But recently, very recently, I had food poisoning about 2.5 weeks ago. It was brutal. And you know what? I went ahead and took some of this over the counter stuff, and I didn't sleep very well or have very much relief until I did. And so it's kind of like, hey, a couple of Tylenol and and other type stuff that allowed me to get better. And so I think everything deserves a measured approach, and I tend not to resort to such things though, unless I have to. But that's good advice. I think your mindset is very similar to mine on that topic. We used to have a guy on the show, Dex the Algo Capitalist, and I've talked to him quite a bit. And this was like 2017. And the way he said it, because he actually was a trader on the East Coast, he wasn't in New York. But the point is, though, is he was linked in to the whole thing. And when 9/11 happened, he said that gold technically went priceless. You couldn't buy it. Nobody was selling it. There
Interesting.
was no price for gold at the time that the airplanes hit, and for the immediate time after that. So your comment was, what's the price of gold? Well, the answer at that time was there was no price. It literally went priceless. So very, very interesting stuff right there.
Very true. Well, and I had again, it's the old saying about, I've known people who will say, especially for those of us who've been on the earth a while, and especially when people like myself work in consulting roles, where people will say things along the lines of, oh God, not another war story from whomever. And it's like, yeah, but you know what? This is kind of like the tribe sitting around the fire in the hut or in the cave with stories about things you need to learn in life, kind of thing. And just the reality of the way things work, whether it's academia, whether it's government, whether it's commercial firms. And case in point, I had a friend of mine who was really pushing me, saying you need to get coconut oil into your diet, especially with the medications I take. And I'm like, oh God, man, and so I did. And of course, what? Well, I was a lot better. And then, of course, I did the normal thing a Sigma personality does, who's also a Virgo, is I started beating myself up saying, damn, I should have been doing this 20 years ago. I am so thankful to all of you in the audience, and I mean that sincerely, to all of you, to Frank at Quite Frankly's audience, and other folks I've spoken to or other people who do their own shows. In fact, I have a meeting scheduled, I'm quite serious, in a city near me where I'll be meeting a source to one of our other favorite alternative providers out there, who I literally was ready to travel to New York State to go meet this person. And then I found out, oh, wait, no, they're in another place now. And we were both joking about the fact, okay, how many miles from before we reach the place where we're meeting will we have our cell phones in a Faraday bag? Trust but verify. But I cannot wait to sit down and talk to this person, because they have years and years and years of experience in investigations and other things. And I think one of the hardest lessons for me over the years, folks, whether it's the Tylenol topic or some of the others, is it kind of circles back to what happened during the coup, and some relatives I have that got angry over any discussion on that topic. And my response was, my rule of thumb was, I've got somebody telling me to do something or take something that may or may not have a negative impact on me, or I can do nothing and take chances with the problem that you say is coming down the road. I'm going to choose the latter, because the sources of that direction to me is often wrong or has its own agenda. Now, if things change, okay, I may do that thing they're telling me to do. And it's the same with all of this stuff. It's your taxes, it's where you live. I know people who I've met recently who've said, well, now that all the social engineering has stopped, I'm glad I no longer need to attend school board meetings or local government meetings. And I almost fell out
It
of my
doesn't stop.
I almost fell out of my chair. I'm like, I'm sorry, where did you get that memo? I'm like, no. They just change. And somebody, I think that guy's wife looks at me and goes, well, you mean this is still going on? And I'm like, the war never ends. I mean, it's like in Babylon 5 when somebody says, well, the Vorlons and the shadows are gone. Everything's okay now. And it's like, well, no, because all the people that were influenced by the shadows and the Vorlons are now stepping into those roles. It's just the nature of things. Conflict and chaos versus order and discipline. Which side are you on? And this is the true meaning, by the way, folks, for what the Zoroastrians believe, the predecessors to Mithraism and Zoroastrianism out of modern day Persia, who loosely said, and I know believers in this faith will say, Veles, that's not exactly what we believe, but he loosely said that the universe is a place of constant conflict between good and evil. And good does not always look as obvious as you might think it would, and evil doesn't always look as obvious as you might think it would. I always love the line by someone I loathe and despise being Joseph Stalin when he said, trust no one, not even yourself. It's like, I got to give him that one. That's close enough. I gotta give Joseph a little flexibility on that one.
Oh, I was talking to some pretty notable internet personalities. I was on a panel the other day, and I said, in politics came up, and I said, well, if you really want to understand it, read Marx and Engels. And they're like, Marx and Engels? Yes, go read them. Like, you're going to understand that the best lies are mixed with like 80% truth.
I've said on this show several times, I've said in consulting engagements, I may loathe and despise Marx because of what he created. I may loathe and despise Karl Marx because of how he treated his wife and kids. But unholy evil that he is, you can't beat his research method at the London Library. His methodology for approaching research and similar, and his approach towards history, as the old saying goes, your hypothesis sounds good, maybe wrong, but his research approach was top notch.
Yeah, well, okay, so to quote Tom Luongo, in a sense, what he says is the communists are really good at identifying the problem. Their solutions are just terrible. And you see, the only difference between communists and libertarians is libertarians read better books, but neither of them get anything done.
There's the other phrase about, I think H.L. Mencken said it. It's one of those famous commentators who, exactly along the lines of what you're saying, Algo, that somebody who articulates the problem we're facing beautifully, but there's still no solution. And it was Mencken, I thought, who said something to the effect of, some particular group comes up with really amazing solutions, all of which are horrible, wrong, and will never work.
Right.
Yeah, or my personal favorite, I was having a discussion with some business people recently. And I said, one of our former colleagues who used to run one of the business journals in this area of the country was having a talk with me. And I said, how's your consulting business going? And he goes, well, but I don't know that I can live with myself. And I said, what's the problem? And he goes, I keep getting paid to come into businesses, especially private family-owned businesses, and do a root cause analysis of their problems. And I said, I have a feeling I know where this is going. And he goes, and then I articulate to them what the plan could be to get the ship turned in the right direction. And the owner or the board of directors or whomever go, that's great, let's do it. And he goes, and then usually somebody in the back row goes, wait a minute, do we have to change our culture? It's like, well, yes. Oh, yeah, no. Because changing our culture means that we here in the room who are the problem are still going to keep working here. So we're not changing anything. That's why I hate to say it, but there is truth to the thing about sometimes really massive disasters or shakeups are a good thing. I knew a guy from, oh, Lord Jesus, it wasn't Zenith. He worked for one of oh, I know, it was Motorola. I knew a guy from Motorola that was one of their merger experts. And he talked about every time he came in to a company acquired by Motorola, he would build gallows. And we're all sitting around a table in Washington, D.C. at a restaurant. And I leaned forward and I said, "You're going to have to walk me through that." And all the older New Yorkers are just nodding. And I'm like, uh-oh, this is another one of those things I don't know. And the guy goes, "I would look at the people we just acquired and said, there's no way we would have acquired you unless you were doing it wrong." So he's like, "I build a gallows." He goes, I hang the first 6 to 9 executives I probably meet with. And he goes, "It's cruel, it's brutal, but it works." He goes, "I create upward mobility for everybody who's mad and bitching that they can't get promoted. I get rid of the people causing the problem. And I put the people who are moving into their chairs and their offices on notice. You got 90 days and don't pull any crap of just laying people off. I want real measurable change and results, or else you're gone." And he said, it's just the nature with those large corporations, the way things work. We know where the problem is. The problem is always the senior leadership. Nobody ever wants to hear that. "I have an MBA from wherever." "Yeah, I just fired 10 of you." And please don't take this the wrong way. It's nothing against you having an MBA, and it's nothing against you coming from any of these top schools. It's because you got lazy. It's kind of like the not Freakonomics, but the guy in the 1980s who was all the rage. He was one of the people involved in publishing all those turnaround books. Used to have shows on PBS, and he did an interview with one of the top analysts of Detroit, and it was this famous quote about, "There's nothing worse than entrenched success." And he goes, "That's why the American car industry blew up on the tarmac. After World War II, we just didn't have any real competition." And as I've shared with all of you on the show, General Motors was so irritated by Ford, they gave Chevrolet the best engineers and the best resources and said, "Your job is to keep Ford at bay while we continue to jack up prices on customers buying Buicks, Oldsmobiles, and Cadillacs." And by the 1980s, General Motors was in such a tight spot, they had to create an entire car company called Saturn to simply compete with one Ford product, which was the Ford Escort, and they still couldn't do it right.
Well, yeah, I think during the 2008 crisis, a lot of the auto companies got bailed out, and Ford is the only of the big three that didn't take any bailout money. So
correct. Well, and of course, what as the old saying goes, folks, if you're in an industry that's having problems, the people that are going to fix those problems are not people from that industry. Who was it who came into Ford right before the 2008 economic collapse? An ex-Boeing official. And he did things very differently, and that was the only reason why they didn't have a cash crunch. By the way, Scotty in New York City, Fabian socialists are in for the long haul. Yes, but the thing that always kills me is, why do there keep being more Fabians? They should have all died out after the 1930s, and damn, they don't just keep breeding.
Yeah, well, boy, that's a whole nother can of worms, and I actually have to jump. But yeah, I'd say go read the Jekyll Island, Creature from Jekyll Island. It's a great book. Goes into that.
A very good book. So have a great weekend, everybody. And Algo, my thanks as always for running the AWACS.
Hey, that's my pleasure. It's always good to have you on.
Be well, everybody. We'll see you when we see you.
Ciao, everybody.